Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Ayub Brazik. I'm the Government Relations Coordinator here at the Mosque Foundation, and I will be the moderator for this afternoon's event. I'd like to begin the program with an introduction by the now former president of the Mosque Foundation. His term ended last night. Please join me in welcoming President Osama Jamal.
Thank you. Yeah, we did not have a coup, and no ex-president is in a jail or any place. We have a very peaceful transformation of powers here, and alhamdulillah, thanks God. And and you see, I'm still well and fine. On behalf of the Mosque Foundation, I would like to welcome each and every one of you, especially our guests here and our candidates, whom we are very delighted to have them meet with their constituents. The Mosque Foundation value civic engagement very highly, and we encourage our community to take part in the electoral process, to register to vote, and to be involved and be an informed voter, so they can meet with their candidates, ask them the questions about, what they are going to do for their district and how they can work to make sure that there is a successful district in our state. So we are delighted to have everyone in here. The Mosque Foundation is known to be one of the major mosques, not only in Chicago, by the way, even in the country, and a host for a diverse group of community, predominantly though Palestinian, Jordanian, Yemenis and Syrian, and we have quite a bit of a mix, as well as Indo-Pakistani community members. So we cherish this diversity. We celebrate who we are and where we came from. And probably as you look around, you can see exactly what I'm talking about, the beautiful diversity of our community. Once again, thank you for coming in here. I know it is Saturday, it is a shopping day, and it is sometimes others are still having work today, but your presence give us delight, and welcome to the Mosque Foundation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Peace on everyone here. My name is Abdullah Mitchell. I'm the Executive Director of the Council of Islamic Organizations, and on behalf of the all 77 member organizations across Greater Chicago, we welcome you this afternoon to offer you this opportunity to hear from the candidates themselves who are running for national office, for seats in Congress, where many policies that some of which we were discussing this afternoon impact us as a community. I would like to emphasize to you, or let me make one footnote, One footnote in addition to this, we are also, this session is being live streamed on Facebook to give access to those who could not be with us today. The whole purpose of our gathering here today is, as I stated moments ago, to give you an opportunity to hear from the candidates, to understand their positions on national issues that impact our community. It is, as a nonprofit 501c3 organization, that today is a nonpartisan event. We've extended an invitation to all 24 candidates that are for office here in the districts contiguous to Chicago. With that said, the views that will be shared this evening will be those of the candidates. They are not aligned with us as an organization. Our sole purpose here is voter education, to make you aware, knowledgeable, and understanding where the candidates stand. This afternoon's program will be led and moderated by Mr. Razik, who earlier introduced himself. So at this time, I would like to turn the platform over to Ayub. Ayub?
Thank you, Brother Mitchell. Again, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So, if we can just briefly cover the format of today's event, and then I'll give an opportunity for each candidate to give a 2-minute introduction before we begin our questions. And to that point, our questions were sourced from the audience members here this afternoon and those at home joining us on live stream, Facebook and YouTube. And members and registrants were requested to submit a question that they would like to ask the candidate from their respective districts, and that's what we'll be doing this afternoon. So, without further ado, if you could join me in welcoming our first candidate, Mr. Representative Sean Casten of the 6th District.
Thank you. So thank you all so much. Thank you to CIOGC. Thank you to the Islamic Foundation. Too many to mention. Ever since I first ran in 2018, I've lost track of how many events you all have hosted, and you walk what you preach, as civic engagement goes. So I am because of redistricting, we're in this weird situation. I am not currently in the 6th District. This will be the 6th District after the next election, so I am the incumbent in the district, even though I don't represent this community right now. I came in 2018. I'm a chemical engineer by training and ran a few clean energy companies. I got involved in politics when I ran for Congress. That's the entirety of my political experience, is 2 terms in Congress and shooting for a 3rd. And I basically ran because after Trump was elected, I could not stomach the idea that we were governed by someone who was trying to divide us. And I've always thought that we have so much more in common as Americans than divides us, and there's so much pressure to focus on those things that make us unique and not the things that make us different. And I came in with a focus on climate change, saying, okay, how do we make sure that we protect our climate and grow our economy and look out for everybody? And how do we make sure that as we make these transitions, we look out for people in need? That expanded into, which we've done quite a bit of. We've done a lot of work on democracy reforms, because so much of what we have, this is weirdly prescient, and I wish it wasn't. At the end of after the last election, I spent a lot of time with constitutional scholars saying, what are we most concerned about in the transition? And they said document retention. And so we led an effort to send letters to every member of the Trump administration, making it very clear that there are legal ramifications for not transferring documents. And we find ourselves there now. But all of this is not because they're Republicans or Democrats or men or women or your gender or your religion or anything else. It's because we are all Americans. And I'd put a challenge to all of you to remember that, because if you go back to common sense, Thomas Paine, he wrote this thing in 1776 that he was trying to convince people who had come from a lot of different countries that it was worth becoming the United States. And he said, I'm going to misquote this, but he said, our lesser distinction is where we are from. Our greater distinction is that we're Americans. And he knew at the time that there is always going to be pressure to define us in separate ways. And yet all that we have accomplished, all that we're proudest of as a country, is when we've remembered that we have that greater distinction. And it's been a privilege to be someone who can not only advocate for that legislatively, but also try to advocate for that out in the community. And I'm grateful for all the resources that you provide, and look forward to continuing to serve and to your questions today. The one last thing I would just say, because I know we're tight on time, I'm doing 2 different events and unfortunately have a hard stop at 3:10, so if I get up and leave before the end, it is not because of the question that preceded that question. It's just because we're a little bit tight on time. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Casten. And actually, you guys can hang on to this mic. Okay. Yeah. Hopefully we'll be right on schedule. We'll be moving pretty quick this afternoon. I'd like to introduce our next candidate. And again, I know we asked you before the program, Mr. James Velikos of the 4th District.
You got it.
Hi, my name is James Velikos. I'm running in the 4th District of Illinois for Congress. First time running for Congress. I would say I'm a very unique candidate. I'm a Republican, but I'm more of an independent centralist. I'm a small business owner who started at the beginning of COVID. I have an HVAC company, insulation company, and a solar company. I have a bachelor's of science in renewable energy and have a master's in advanced energy fuels management. I have 10 years of industry experience in the field of wind, energy, solar, thermodynamics, building science, energy development, and general energy production. I have a strong background in small business, and most of my family are small business owners. I have worked with a diverse group of people, blue collar, white collar. I have attended both public and private school. My father is a Greek immigrant who migrated to America at 16. My mother was born in America. I was born and raised in Westchester, which is a Chicago suburb, and it's interesting because me and my friends joke that it's a perfect microcosm of the United States. Very diverse group of people. You have whites, Mexicans, Asians, just a microcosm of our country, and we all got along. So, in addition to that, I have a strong and diverse network of friends, colleagues, a plethora of business sectors, which I consult and try to give myself an even keel approach. Just quickly, a couple my major policies I want to highlight is inflation, cost of living. With current government spending has gotten out of control. Food, gas, clothing, homes, rents, virtually all goods and services have risen to levels that I wonder how people are surviving. I want to launch an entire forensic audit of the Fed, the IRS, and hold all those responsible. And I will. This is the biggest concern of Americans, and it's a priority of mine. Inflation is being caused by massive spending by our government, the irresponsible printing of money by the Fed, and the corruption that has rotted away our democracy. I'd like to grow small businesses and domestic manufacturing because I believe that would greatly alleviate the stress on Americans' pockets. Energy independence and renewable energy is a big background of mine, but I think that currently it's been hijacked. The biggest factor in determining our country's strength in the world is energy. I don't believe in EV cars. I believe in heavy nuclear power. It's very energy dense. I believe in hydrogen fuel cells because it eliminates the need for batteries, and this is a very different approach than many would say. As far as healthcare, I believe it's very damaged. The costs are out of control, and this is something that we'd like to touch on too. And lastly, taxes. Dramatically reducing the size of federal government and their spending would alleviate the stress on Americans. And by reducing federal income tax and reducing government, we are ensuring that citizens' hard-earned money in this country are not being sent overseas on proxy wars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falcos. And to introduce our final candidate from the 7th District, please join me in welcoming Representative Danny Davis.
Well, thank you all very much. Let me apologize, first of all, for being late, and I want to give a great deal of credit to the person who was communicating with us because they prepared us for this evening very well. And so here I come late after she's laid out everything that we needed to do, what we needed to know, and where we needed to be. My name is Danny Davis, and I've been around a long time, and I'm delighted to be here with these two young Americans who are interested in public policy decision-making. I grew up in rural Arkansas, went to a one-room school. My parents were sharecroppers. We never went to school more than 5 months a year, and so I've had a long road from Arkansas to Washington, D.C. as a member of Congress. I've been in public office since 1979 when I ran for the Chicago City Council and managed to get elected, and so I've held some office since then. 11 years there, 6 years at the county board, and then 23 years as a member of Congress. I've been all over the world that I can almost imagine. Travel a lot with a friend, a fellow who died, Prince Asiel Ben Israel. Prince and I went to Africa about 10, 12 times to together. I used to travel with another fellow, Buzz Palmer, who died, and we both worked with the People's Program at the University of Illinois, and we traveled throughout Europe. I got involved in politics when I was a little child. I didn't know it was politics. I just knew I wondered how things happen and what made them happen. And so I studied political science in undergraduate school, switched to psychology to do a master's degree, and then got involved with other kind of things and did a doctoral degree that I've had since 1977. So working in politics has taught me that everything that we do is precious, and that it doesn't often matter so much where you come from. What really matters is where you go. And if you have a set of basic beliefs, that's what guides your actions. I believe in equality, equal justice, equal opportunity, equal protection under the law, all people, and pretty much work in that vein. So it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon and share with you for the time. And I also just want to mention that one of the candidates I know very well, and I think you're going to be a very fortunate community to have him represent you, although he has not done so past. So it's good to be here with you, Representative, and it's good to meet you, sir. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And before we get into the questions here, I just want to extend my sincerest appreciation to the council for organizing this wonderful event and honoring us by hosting it in the Mosque Foundation. And Sister Senna, for your help. Thank you so much. And Brother Abdullah Mitchell, if we can give a hand. Brother Rashad Khan, Sister Amna in the back there. She's so our first topic this afternoon is gun violence. And our first question is for Representative Caston. Ghost guns are readily available, can be purchased without a background check, and are untraceable. What policies do you support to curtail this easy access to ghost guns?
There we go. So we did just in the House pass a bill to essentially ban the sale of ghost guns. Now we can question how enforceable it is to measure that, and we've gone through and done it. We need to get the Senate to do the same. It's a little hard to do things in the Senate. If I could pivot a little bit, if you look at the guns in circulation, there's a direct correlation between the rate of gun violence in your community and the rate of gun ownership in your community. You can see it across the country. The states with the lowest rates of gun ownership have the lowest rates of gun violence. The opposite is also true. I say that not to pivot away from ghost guns, but to say we have to address the fact that we live in a country right now that has 400 million guns. We have more guns than people. We have more guns per capita than any other country in the world. If we got rid of half the guns in the country tomorrow, we would still have more guns per capita than any other country in the world. The number 2 country in the world is Yemen. I don't know if anybody here is from Yemen, but put that in your head that we have a higher rate of gun ownership in here than Yemen. And so if we don't have a conversation, should we ban ghost guns? Absolutely. Should we ban assault rifles? Absolutely. Should we have universal background checks? Absolutely. But we need to have a hard conversation about the fact that since the Heller case went through the Supreme Court, we have essentially decided to ignore the first 13 words of the Second Amendment about the well-regulated militia. And the Constitution that our founders wrote said that the Congress has the power to summon militias, among other things, in order to protect us from domestic insurrections. And on January 6th, Congressman Davis and I were sitting in the House while an armed, unregulated militia was outside carrying weapons that they believed and our courts have said are allowed under the Second Amendment, our founders would be ashamed of what we've done. So yes, ban ghost guns, but we have to go beyond to get back to a world where we actually have a Second Amendment consistent with our founders' intent. And that's going to take legislative work and the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Representative Caston. And I extend the question to Representative Davis.
I agree with everything that Representative Caston has said. As a matter of fact, I am convinced that we need to reduce the number of guns in our society. Personally, if I had the opportunity, not only would we get rid of assault weapons, I don't believe that any citizen has any need for an assault weapon unless he or she are part of the military and in some cases part of law enforcement. And so we have to change the way we think about these things. I have a friend who used to always say that new occasions call for new truths, and new situations make ancient remedies uncouth. So I understand how we arrived at the Second Amendment, but many people now who go hunting for each other. And the protection that they talk about is protection from others. Many instances of gun violence occur because a gun is present. I have lived in urban inner city America. Came here when I was 19 years old. And so I've seen it every day. Matter of fact, my grandson was murdered in his home where two other kids kind of pushed their way into the house. They had a little scuffle, and they knew each other. They were all friends. They had a swapping club where they swapped clothes. And you let me wear your gym shoes, and you wear my shirt, or whatever. One had a gun, and somebody said, shoot, and he shot. Well, all of their lives have been totally disrupted. All of their family lives have been totally disrupted. And they had the little discussion or argument with no gun. Most anybody maybe would have gotten scratched or hit. Nobody would have been killed. So we have to be very serious about why we think the way we do, what we do about it. And I am pleased with the fact that I am part of a political party that has decided. I felt very good when we voted to ban assault weapons, although I knew that we'd have a tough time in the other body. But I believe that if you want to go south, the first thing you do is turn and face that direction. And I often say that every time we make a step, I get a little bit closer to 95th Street. But if I'm heading up towards Evanston, or I'm going around in circles, I'll never get to South Bend.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Representative Davis. And Mr. Falikos, I extend the same question, and I'd like to include an additional question here. Earlier this month, a white male armed with an AR-15 assault weapon was arrested in Inglewood, a predominantly African-American neighborhood, after he randomly fired his assault weapon in the direction of an adjacent park. The incident was only 1 month after the tragic murders in Niles, Illinois. Common link in recent mass shootings here in Illinois and elsewhere has been assault weapons. In addition to the previous question, will you support a ban on assault weapons?
So I'm a constitutionalist, and I believe in the Second Amendment. And first off, let me start by saying that Chicago has the strictest gun laws in the country, but they have the most homicides. So they could play, with these statistics all they want, but those are the facts. And everyone knows it. Everyone knows Chicago has the most deaths, homicide. What's the cause of that? Single mother households typically, and lack of opportunities. And in addition to that, this gun violence is a multifaceted issue that is a mental health problem, in my opinion, stemming from SSRIs that they give children, stemming from amphetamines. We have an amphetamines crisis in this country that's not talked about. We have the social media is a huge driving force. And as I said before, lack of single-parent households. So mental stigma around this needs to be removed. And guns don't kill people; people do in all cases. So I think this is a good topic and needs to be investigated more. That kid up north in Highland Park, he had a lot of that stuff doesn't even add up. In addition to him having severe mental health issues. They'll tell you until they're blue in the face. They want to disarm you. I'd be wondering, why do they want to disarm you? And in the Constitution, we have the right to bear arms not for hunting, not for sport, but for a tyrannical government. That's why it's in there. That's why it's there. So I rest on that, and I think that we need to address this issue as a mental health problem that is in this country and make mental health more available for people.
Thank you, Mr. Velikos, and I'd like to offer Representative Caston 30 seconds to respond.
Look, Chicago has a lot of gun crimes because 40% of all gun crimes in Chicago are done with guns that are trafficked in from out of state. Our challenge is that we don't have a federal anti-trafficking law. We need one. I've actually written bills along with Robin Kelly to get those passed, and we need to bring them online. I would also keep in mind that if you suffer from mental health, you are much more likely to be a victim of gun crime. You are not more likely to be a perpetrator of gun crime, with one exception, which is you are more likely to kill yourself. The majority of gun deaths in our country are by suicide. And we do not have a higher rate of mental health issues than other countries. We don't have a higher rate of depression than other countries. We do not have a higher rate of people who have bad days than other countries. What we do uniquely in this country is give you the ability to make sure that your bad day is your last day. And it is frankly irresponsible to suggest that the solution to that is to not confront the fact that our Constitution most definitely does not protect us from tyranny. Read the Constitution, please. Clause 15 of Article 2. Congress has the authority to summon a militia for the purpose of defending the laws of the United States, protecting us from foreign invaders, or suppressing domestic insurrections. It says nothing about tyranny. We committed to being Americans. We committed to upholding the values of this country. If you decide that you want to attack the country on January 6th, you are a terrorist, and we should call you as such.
Thank you, Representative Caston. Our next topic is on immigration. I know immigration is a really important issue for our community here and for communities across the United States. Our first question from our audience is, and the question is to Mr. Velikos. What is your position on offering a legislative pathway to citizenship for individuals who have fallen out or will soon lose legal status due to the termination of the DACA program and temporary protected status?
Having come from a family of immigrants, I wholeheartedly believe in properly vetted immigration. I think it's a backbone of our economy. The concept of clear and open borders is not only a domestic security threat, but it's a free-for-all. It encourages child sex trafficking, drug trafficking, and sexual abuse. It encourages low-skill wages, which drive down the wages for other illegals. It's not fair for other countries' residents who are waiting to come in. My father's from Greece, so is it right that we could just allow open borders and if my family came here illegally, is that right over someone else? So I think what's the solution for this? My solution for the DACA recipients is to compromise in exchange for taking these recipients and giving a path for citizenship, I would like also in exchange, I would like funding to secure our border with different technology, border security, and meter who comes in, and that goes for our northern border too. All the countries that you could identify that have open borders, they have massive issues, and they spin out of control. So border security is a domestic security concern that I believe is, you look at the humanitarian crisis on the southern border, and then the media hides it. So, I think people could make up their own minds what's going on, and they're seeing that more and more, and they're starting to see that the media is lying to them, and that the media has a public interest of their own agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falikos. In addition to the previous question, Representative Davis, what policy obstacles do you see in preventing the passage of comprehensive immigration reform?
Well, I've believed in comprehensive immigration. Thoughts on immigration were first suggested that other individuals from all over the world. I think I read that when I was about 8 or 9 years old. The policy formulation and ways of dealing with, I believe that we do in fact need to protect our borders. We need to do all of those things that I've just heard about, certainly many of them. But I still believe that there should be the opportunity for individuals in this country who have come to find a pathway to citizenship. I represent the Inglewood community. I also represent some of Little Village, some of Pilsen, which are basically communities where individuals have come from Mexico and other South and Central areas. I think we have to do all of it at the same time. I don't think excuses. For example, I was listening to the conversation relative to the Constitution, and I thought about the fact that in the Constitution, my ancestors were slaves, and they were counted as 3/5 of a person, many of them, in the Constitution. Women had virtually no rights. They certainly couldn't vote. They had no right to vote. Didn't get the right to vote until a little more than 100 years ago. And so our country is constantly moving and reacting and promoting the changes that are necessary to make America become what it has never been. But it has the potential of being. And so we move in a direction. Plus, I think one of the reasons that many people want to come here is because we are thought to be the most humane, the most open, with the greatest opportunities of any country, especially large countries in the world. But we also have problems and issues that need to be changed. As good as we are the most incarcerated nation in the world. There's no other nation on the face of the earth that has as many of its people incarcerated. And so changes are needed, but I'm for comprehensive immigration.
Thank you, Representative Davis. Representative Caston, we asked that you respond to the same question. Again, we're asking, what do you see as the biggest obstacles to these sorts of policy initiatives?
Sure. So let me let me try to not repeat anything. Number one, absolutely support. We not only support but voted for the Dream and Promise Act in now 2 terms, which would provide paths to citizenship to our dreamers, to our DACA recipients, and the Farm Worker Modernization Act, which is a huge chunk of immigration we don't talk about as much. But remember that for years we recognized that farm workers naturally move back and forth to follow the crops. If you're a rancher and you've got a crop and you've got a bunch of cattle in North Dakota and you move them to Texas, that's a part of your job. When we created a border with Mexico, all of a sudden that became an immigration question instead of a labor question. And so we had the Bracero program for a long time that recognized people could move back and forth. Then we stopped doing that program. Now all of a sudden you've got families who are doing the same thing that they always did, but they are, quote unquote, illegal. What do we do about that? Well, the Farm Worker Modernization Program was meant to address that. We passed that. We've voted through this. Those 2 programs, by the way, would address the majority of the undocumented immigrants in this country. I should also mention that the majority, not the same majority, but the majority of undocumented immigrants in this country, roughly 12 million, the majority of them are visa overstays, not border crossings. People who come here legally on a student visa stay to get a job. People who come on a tourist visa, they've got a child, their child has a health issue, they stick around longer. That's the majority of our undocumented population. If you want to talk about borders, fine, but you're not really talking about immigration. If you want to talk about undocumented populations in this country, we want to live in a surveillance state that's going to monitor people who came here legally, did nothing wrong, and overstayed a visa? We should talk about why we don't have that conversation. And I think there's a 2-part answer to your question of why this is so hard. The first is the filibuster. The Senate was designed by our founders to frustrate democracy. Congressman Davis described the history of his ancestors. The Great Compromise of 1789 was because the southern states refused to join a union where majority will would prevail because that might end slavery. And so we created the Senate to say, let's over-represent states and block that. The Senate then made it worse by adding the filibuster. So you now have something like immigration reform that is hugely popular with the American people, but it can't get through because 12 million people in Illinois have just as much of a vote in the Senate as 40 million people in California, as 570,000 people in Wyoming. And so the Senate is non-representative. The filibuster makes it worse, and that is why those bills have not come up to a vote. We need to find a way either to fix the Senate or to find a way to understand why has it become so partisan to continue to be the country that welcomes the best and brightest to our shores, right? And I think the answer to that one is something that we all have some agency in. Because if you look at the history of the United States, we have always been a nation of immigrants. We've always been a country that welcomes best and brightest to our shores. We're proud of both of those things. We've also always been a country that's racist towards someone. Right? We had the Chinese Exclusion Act. We didn't welcome the Jews as much as we should have after World War II. We've had plenty of anti-Muslim issues more recently. We've had the Irish were not welcome for a while, right? It changes over time, and historically, the population of this country that is most resistant to new immigration is the population that came just before, right? And they don't totally have their footing yet in this country. It's, you look at like the Irish and the Italians, one of them came in, you can be the cops, and then the next one came in, you can't be a cop because that's my job, right? And I think that conversation of how we recognize that once we're here, we are all Americans, and how do we continue to be welcoming and bring them in? Because otherwise, those forces that are looking to divide us have a very easy tool that says, you know what your problems are caused by? Someone who doesn't look like you. It's easy. Every demagogue in the world uses that trick. And it's on all of us collectively to stand up to it.
Thank you, Representative Casson. And and this is right on topic here is sort of xenophobia, the persecution of racial minorities, religious minorities, and we see that nationalism and racism is really on a rise here in the United States and across the world. So, and this question is for, and we'll begin with Representative Caston as well. And the question is for all 3 candidates. As national and racist ideologies increase, so too does religious intolerance. Today, religious hatred directed at Muslims is on the rise again. And we see this in nationalist movements in India, white supremacy in the United States. So the first question is, have you or do you intend to support the appointment of a special envoy for monitoring in combating Islamophobia?
Let me take a flyer on that. I don't know the specific details of the special envoy, but broadly speaking, totally supportive of the issue. We do have a global trend of the rise of authoritarianism. It was not started by Donald Trump, but it was certainly abetted by Donald Trump. And I say that because we've always had those voices in our country. But when we as the United States stopped telling ourselves, remember after 9/11, George W. Bush said this was not about Islam. That was the first speech he gave, right? And he needed to give that speech because he understood that as the president of the United States, your words matter, and they drive what happens. We did not see anywhere near that level of maturity from Donald Trump. And that hurt us not only in the United States of activating hate groups, like the Proud Boys, the Three Percenters, what have you, but it also sent a signal to the rest of the world that if the United States doesn't care about this stuff, maybe we don't either, right? Viktor Orban in Hungary is activating these same issues. Viktor Orban's senior policy advisor is a guy who started work for Strom Thurmond. You remember the Dixiecrats? He then moved and worked for Netanyahu in Israel, and now he's working for Orban. You can see this thread where smart political people have figured out that you can win elections and win power with ever larger majorities in democratic governments and ever lower turnout if you're very surgical about activating your base and suppressing others. You mentioned India. We've seen it all over the world, and so we've seen this pushback. And I think we, as the United States, have the ability, and I would submit to you a moral obligation, to demonstrate the behavior we want others to demonstrate what the rule of law looks like, what equality looks like. Not because we're perfect, but because if we don't, we're not going to like the people who take the leadership role that we vacate.
Thank you, Representative Kessin. Mr. Falikos.
I think it's completely blown out of proportion about a race problem in this country. You talk to your everyday Americans, you're not talking about race. That's the media broadcasting it 24/7, saying there is a race problem. People care about inflation. People don't care about color of your skin. I have black neighbors. Your average American does not care. And don't be fooled by the bureaucracy trying to drill in your head that there is a race problem in this country. People care about their family. People care about their livelihood, the cost of living, the inflation that's completely out of control. These are the everyday issues that people care about. This race is to distract you from there. I believe in religious freedom for all, no matter what. That should absolutely not be obstructed in any way, shape, or form. I don't tolerate racism, but how it's always said, race is behind everything. In this country, I have one of my very good friends. He's black. He has a very successful HVAC company, and we have even talked about joining forces. And when we talk, there's nothing like this comes up with. We don't talk about race. We talk about your everyday issues that we're facing. We talk about the cost of equipment that we're purchasing that's twice as expensive as it is last year, and now that cost gets passed on to the homeowner. So these are the common issues. You go around, people think white people are talking about racism 24/7. That's just a made-up fabrication. People care about their livelihoods, the cost of living, and their families, and race is not even in the conversation.
Mr. Falikos, now to the question, do you intend to support the appointment of a special envoy at the State Department for monitoring and combating specifically Islamophobia? Yes or no?
It's not a yes or no question, so I choose not to answer that. I don't think we need more bureaucratic red tape to monitor. What's Congress there for? Congress should be.
And again, the position isn't to monitor international Islamophobia, so it would be beyond the borders of the United States. It's a State Department position. So would you commit to supporting that or something similar to that?
That's why we have the FBI. That's why we have the CIA. That's their job. We don't need another industry and more money being funneled for that reason. So I believe that's already taken care of by the CIA and the FBI. However, the FBI has their own agenda, as most Americans realize that. So that's my opinion on the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Valicos. Representative Davis.
Well, the answer for me is yes. And, you know, actually, when 9/11 started, I was in Tel Aviv, Israel that day. And a group of us talking about differences between countries and religions, and a fellow came and said, you know, your country is under attack. And I couldn't believe it. I thought he was joking. And he said, no, look at television. And of course, we did. I have a bunch of, in my operation, I have a committee for almost everything that you could think of, or a task force. And I have something called a multi-ethnic task force that is made up of individuals who are not black. I mean, all of the individuals are people from other places, and we joke about not having any black people other than one or two. The staff person for it is black, one of the people who work for me. And I also taught something called race and ethnic studies at Benedictine University for 10 years before going to Congress. I had to quit after I got elected. But trying to understand and making an effort to understand others. There are so many people who just do not know what happens with other people. Representative Caston mentioned the Irish. You know what the Irish did to overcome some of the inequities and problems they were having? I always say they invented block voting. If you just think of the history of Irish people in this country and the numbers of them who get elected to public office, who become judges, who work as policemen, as firemen, clerks in government, they recognized that having control of some operations would give them an opportunity not to be viewed as second-class citizens. And so this business of voting and being engaged is so important for every group in America. And so, yes, I think we need to work on issues and problems. We need a special. Matter of fact, I thought one time, I said, I wish I'd have become a diplomat when I was doing all this running around. It sounded so good, and, you know, they got these embassies and all this stuff in these countries. And I said, well, I guess I'll just stay a politician and keep doing what I do. But yeah, it's needed. It should happen, and we can make it happen.
Thank you, Representative Davis. So we received a message. There's room for one or two more questions. Those depends on how quickly I can ask. So I'll offer. I'll allow Mr. Representative Casson to answer first. And this question is for all the candidates. There is a sharp division between Israel and many member nations of the UN to the continued legality of the occupation and the establishment of settlements that are dispossessing Palestinians in Jerusalem and surrounding villages. The continued expansion of settlements in occupied Sheikh Jarrah territory within East Jerusalem are deemed to be violation of international law. Our first question on this matter is, do you accept the position that continued expansion of settlements by Israel is in violation of international law? And then we have one more international question, and that is, what is your position on combining the rise of Hindutva nationalism in India and protecting religious minorities within India and the role of the U.S. government in that.
I'm sitting here chuckling that the last question, as we're tight for time, is resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Yes. So I don't want to sound like I'm ducking your question, but I think international law is a very hard construct to apply to the region. I've traveled fairly extensively in the region on both sides of the Green Line, whatever that is, and what. Number one, I think we have an obligation as the upholders of international law to make sure that there are human rights respected in the region, that there is some path to a two-state solution. The history of the Jewish people, I think it is appropriate for us to try to make sure that two-state solution has a nation that is Jewish and democratic. And then what happens to the remaining area? And the reason why I say international law is a hard thing to manage is I think we can stipulate that that not only the settlements, the directives that are given to the IDF when they're in the West Bank, when they're in Gaza, the disequal treatment, the complete absence of property rights to the Palestinian people, we can stipulate that all those are incompatible with our morals as human beings. The hard part in international law is that if we frame this as an international law issue, then we have to confront the fact that we do not really have any robust international law for nationless people, right? If we talk about how people, how the Indians treat the Hindus versus the Muslims, that is a question. How they treat Pakistan, that is a question for international law. If we were to talk about what were the rights and obligations when the region was Transjordan, that's a question for international law. If we talk about what are the rights in the region pre-1967, where you had Jordan on one side and Egypt on the other, and Lebanon and Syria, that's a question for international law. You've now got this issue where after the Six-Day War, Israel said, we want to do land for peace. There was an agreement eventually with Egypt of land for peace, and the Egyptians said, I'm simplifying, we'd like the Sinai back, but we don't particularly want the people in Gaza. Right? And then you had, in the West Bank, Jordan saying, we've got this Hashemite kingdom thing going on. I don't really want the people in the West Bank. And so we've been left with these two populations of people who are not covered under any normal rubric of international law, because the Israelis will tell you this is not Israel. The Jordanians will tell you this is not Jordan. The Egyptians will tell you this is not Egypt. And there's no question that the creation of the settlements, all these other issues, are making it harder and harder to realize that. The question that I'm always raising when I've been to the region is not we hear all the time about what the interests are of U.S. politicians and U.S. politically active groups. What are the things that we could do that would facilitate on the ground the circumstances we want? And when I was there in February, I met with Prime Minister Lapid, and I put the question to him, we think we need to establish, an easy lift seems to be to establish a U.S. embassy in East Jerusalem, make sure that we've got representation for the people there through the State Department, and push for elections in the PA, but have the State Department push, as Condoleezza Rice did, to make sure that people in East Jerusalem can vote. And the response that came back was, well, we really have a fragile coalition here, and if you push us too hard, that will activate the far right of Israeli politics, and it will create a circumstance on the ground that you will not like. We put the same question to Prime Minister Shataya on the same trip, and he said basically the same thing. Well, we have a very fragile politics. If you push for elections, it might be Hamas that wins. I'd be very careful not to push for this. And so you've got a bunch of political leaders who have it in their own self-interest to preserve a status quo that is increasingly brittle. And I don't know how to solve that. I'm not going to pretend to be the person who knows how to solve that. But I think our obligation is not to default to international law. It's rhetorically useful, I suppose. But how do we create circumstances on the ground where perhaps we could get to another, moment for an Oslo Accords, moment for a Camp David summit? It doesn't seem like that's possible right now. But I think certainly trying to speak out, use our voices where we can on settlements, on other issues to preserve that is the best path right now.
He showed us that he can get it done. It's all in the Thank you for the answer. And then again, right before you leave, if you have time, and if that's okay, we want to ask, what do you believe the role of the United States is in combating the rise of far-right nationalism within India that is persecuting religious minorities, particularly Muslim Indians?
Yes, just in the interest of time, I'd say refer to my previous answer, because this question about how do we suppress the rise of authoritarianism, rise of
again, what is the role of the U.S. in responding?
And I'm saying my previous answer, not the one just on Israel, but the one before about the rise of nationalism. What we're seeing in Modi is cut from the same cloth as Orban, cut from the same cloth as Putin, cut from the same cloth as Trump. Let's divide people, and it's particularly painful in India, a country that was founded as a secular democracy, right? But I think we have to demonstrate with our own example in the first instance, and then we become more credible. We lost credibility in the last administration to be someone who was advocating for some higher ethical standard that is superior to our own self-interest. And I think we need to get back to that point. We're getting there. That's the best answer I have right now.
Thank you. And ma'am, we asked all of our audience members to submit their questions online, so we have to be fair. But Representative Caston, thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to give this opportunity for him to head to the next event. But again, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much.
I just learned how to read, really.
So we posed the same questions to Mr. Falcos and Representative Davis. Mr. Falcos, to you.
My stance on foreign policy is not to get so involved. We have more pressing issues here. However, I do support policies that support religious freedoms for all in this country and abroad. However, I don't like how the U.S. acts as the watchdog of the world and take sides. This creates conflict. When the U.S., you have the industrial military complex throwing money, billions of dollars at different wars that aren't ours. It has massive influence and has geopolitical influence. So I wish, and I'll work for the U.S. taking more of a back seat, regardless of how I feel, because I simply don't think that it's their place. I will support policies that are aimed at not interfering in political battles and proxy wars abroad. I support the people, so my policies are with the best interests of this country, and I hope to work with the Mosque Organization Foundation and the Muslim community to see what other issues are important to them, what other issues are important to them here, and if by talking to people, discover if religious persecution here is a serious concern of theirs. But I'm the man of the people. I'm not bought by any corporation. I don't get any money. I don't get kickbacks. I have $0 in my campaign contributions, simply because I haven't filed with FEC. But my point being is, I'm not in the business of having to choose sides. I'm in the business of acting as an intermediary between the people of this country and the legislative bodies.
Thank you, Mr. Falcos. Representative Davis, we posed the same two questions to you.
Well, I have to admit that I'm very involved in international affairs. The gentleman that I mentioned died, and that I traveled with. His name is Prince Asiel bin Israel, and he and a group of other African Americans established in Israel a black city called Dimona. And of course, I've been there a number of times and interacted with them. I've also been involved in Israel and the Middle East a great deal because I was a big fan of Ralph Bunche, the African-American fella who basically worked on drawing the lines and deciding how the territory could be split up. He was the Undersecretary of the United Nations, and the Secretary was sick. during much of the time. And so he was the primary workforce, led the primary workforce. So I've always been interested. My positions are there really can and should be the creation of a two-state solution, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so there are two serious lobbyists, probably even more than that, but AIPAC and J Street. I generally side with the J Street group, and that's the group that seemed to be more moderate in terms of its positions relative to treatment of the issue. And so, yeah, I believe that there are times when the Israeli government is beyond where I would be in terms of treatment of Palestinians in the area and in terms of negotiation. I've been fortunate to meet with many of the leaders over the years and with Yasser Arafat and others, and so I think there can be levels of humanity as we attempt to solve difficult problems, and it's very difficult. On the India question, I have a photograph of myself shaking hands with Prime Minister Modi, and many of the individuals in my multi-ethnic coalition are of Indian and Pakistani heritage, and many of them are supporters of the Prime Minister and the current government. I support some things and I disagree with other things, and I think there are times when you can do that. It's not always an all or none situation. I make decisions based upon different things. Persecution is wrong wherever it is and whoever is doing it. I mean, that's what Dr. King meant when he said injustice anywhere is a threat to justice. And I think that we can figure out ways to function without persecuting individuals who in some instances have nothing to do. They're innocent. Believe something a certain way. And if you believe in something for yourself, then you should believe in it for others. Whatever I believe for myself, I always take the position that my rights end where the next person's rights begin. And that if I want my rights to be protected, then I need to protect others. Otherwise, not being true. I also recognize that diplomacy is tough. Issues. Again, if we work at it, stand up for it, change ultimately. Difficult things. I've been with the minority. Sam Cooke had a great song. It said the lyrics. Yeah, the lyrics, he said, I was born by the river in a little tent. And just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know some change is going to come. And I believe if we work at it, those changes do come. They will come, but we have to keep working.
Thank you, Representative Davis. We have many questions we weren't able to get to this afternoon, but we here at the Moss Foundation CIGC will be sure to share these with the candidates and share those answers with you. So to our candidates, before I pass it on to Dr. Sullivan and Brother Shad Khan, I just wanted to, in your closing statements, if you could all answer this question. If elected, how do you plan to stay connected with your constituents? We'll begin with Representative Davis, and the question is, if elected, how do you plan to stay connected with your constituents as your closing statement?
One thing that the framers of the Constitution did was make the representative position a 2-year term, which really means that once you get elected, you start campaigning for the next term. You don't have any time to kind of lay back. I have at least 10 or 12 active task forces that I meet with on a regular basis as much as I can. I do as many town halls, as many forums. I visit, for example, tonight I got a speech at the Jamaica's Consulates Associate Friends of Chicago out in Country Club Hills. Tomorrow I got a Speaker and Family and Friends Day at the House of Wisdom Ministries at 10 o'clock. Then at 2 o'clock, I am speaking at the National Association of Community Health Centers Institute downtown in the Grand Ballroom. Then at 5 o'clock, I've got a welcome to the Ukrainian minister, Deputy Minister of Justice at 5 o'clock. And then after that, I've got a radio show at 7 o'clock. And I just got a message, because I looked at it, an invitation to do a radio show at 2 o'clock tomorrow that I'm going to have to turn down because I can't do it. If I was not here right now, I would be at Alderman Walter Barnett. It's back to school picnic. Then I am going to stop by the Illinois Alliance's 8th annual group on my way home to change clothes to get ready for this.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Davis, and thank you for joining us at the forum. Give a round of applause for Representative Davis. Mr. Felikos, again, your closing statement, and how do you plan with constituents?
So I plan to stay connected with my constituents from a grassroots level. My cell phone is public. My email address is public. I'm always available to talk. And I want to make that clear, that clear communication channels between the people of the districts is my number one goal. Not what the media is telling you, but the people who are living in those districts. What are their main concerns? When I started running 2 days before Short Story, I needed to get 1,000 signatures. I had 2 days, and I went out in Brookfield, and 2 days straight got about 800 signatures, and I got some additional help from some volunteers. But I took that time, and I don't have a lot of experience in the political realm. I'm doing this as a small business owner, as your everyday American, putting myself out there, and I just listened to them and talked. And what's important to you? What are your most important items politically, is race a major issue? And the general consensus was that inflation, that cost of living, high taxes is the top issues. And these guys will tell you all they want until they're blue in the face. They'll deter it and they'll go all their ways. But we all know that what our living situations are going, our taxes are rising. And I want to find these policies. If xenophobia is your biggest concern, I will address it. But I just do not believe that is the main concern of most Americans, especially in the 4th District. So I have a Facebook page, I have a website, I have Instagram, I have YouTubes. I'm going to be increasing, going out more, trying to get talking to constituents, finding out what their concerns are, getting feedback, and I'm always available for a phone call, email, and in addition, as a small business owner, I'm going on sales calls in the areas. I'm going on, I'm walking door to door, marketing my business. I'm talking to them every day, and I get a very good feel for. I go in everyone's house and I see what they're about. I have conversations with them. So I'm very connected. I'm not a bureaucrat. I'm not a 30-year politician. By the way, I believe in term limits. But I believe that there should be term limits, and I believe that I'm connected. I'm connected at all levels with the constituents of the 4th District, and I plan to, no matter what I do in the future, to always remain connected with them.
Thank you, Mr. Valicos, and a big thank you to our candidates. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Sabah from the CIOGC.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and greetings of peace to all our friends and family members who are here. First of all, I want to give a heartfelt thanks to the candidates who are here today. I'm the Civic Engagement Chair, and let me introduce myself first. Dr. Sabah Khan is my name, and I work with CIOGC, Council of Islamic Organization of Greater Chicago, for years, trying to mobilize our community members to do more of civic duties and get more engaged in civic-related activities around us. And when we host forums like this, it's super important for us to get a response from the candidates who have committed and taken time to run for offices. And we understand and we respect that this is not an easy job, running for an office and signing up to serve the community. So we have a heartfelt thanks to three of you especially. Our invitation had reached to multiple candidates who are running for offices, for different kinds of offices, and we are planning to do a couple more of these kind of forums. We were successful in getting some of the candidates say yes, and then some were maybes, and some totally declined and didn't want to be here. And that speaks volumes for people who are running for office. And people are taking notes, right? We are taking notes on who is really interested in coming and sitting in front of their constituency, answering their concerns, answering their questions. Not every time we will have a happy or friendly question for our candidates. We love to put our candidates on hot seats because we want to know exactly what you're thinking, what your thought process is, and once elected, what are you exactly going to give back to the people who voted for you. Now, not necessarily all of us who are sitting here are going to vote or not vote. We are a 501c3 organization. We are hosting this forum as a 501c3. We have a C4 that's coming up, but this event today is as a C3. So we are really not endorsing any of the candidates, but we love to see candidates from both the parties, from independent, if there are any independent candidates. We love to hear from them. We love to see them. We love to connect with them because our votes matter. And as CIOGC, like I said, we encourage our community members to be more involved. And when you all show up for these kind of events, it shows how engaged we are as a community. It's something that we have to be, if we want to be at the table, we have to do this, right? And I heard from the candidates here, different opinions, different policies that they are working on. Some we may agree to disagree. I wish all districts are like District 4 that candidate James mentioned, that their concerns are more of a common American, what they worry about in race, in injustice. Those things are something that media is really promoting more than what it happens. And then we hear other side of the story too, where people are really looking for answers and justice. So as CIOGC, civic engagement works towards social justice. We work for the people who feel they need to be heard, okay? And we also work towards our community, helping them get more engaged. Voters registration, going out to vote, census. These are some of the things that we truly believe in, and we want our community members to do more and more. And we've seen that back for a few years, since at least since I've been engaged in CIOGC civic engagement, I've seen a lot of interest from Muslim candidates running for offices, which is such a great thing, right? We want to see more. We want to see more representation at different levels, not only at Muslim, at all faith levels, all races, all cultural background. We want to see more representation because that's what makes America what it is today, right? And we need to see that more and more. So love to see all these people who are here, love to hear from the candidates, and we will be doing more of these kind of sessions, so you would be hearing more from us. In the past, we've done monthly congressional forums where we have invited one candidate at a time and asked them tough questions and heard from them what they would like to hear from us and, all different kind of stuff. This is a multiple candidate forum. We were hoping to have more candidates come up here and be a part of this. But it is what it is. We had 3 people, and they were wonderful. They signed up. And thank you to our staff, Brother Mitchell, Brother Maksud Kadri, Sana. I see Amina, our intern here. So all of you did a lot of groundwork behind this. Getting the questions together was not an easy task to do. We do have still more questions that we wish we had time to ask, but that could be kept for next few, perhaps for future events. And we'll be sharing those questions with everyone. I guess we're sharing it with people who got our invites too, right? And with that being said, I want to again thank everyone for being a part of this. And I'm going to have Brother Irshad Khan, who is our chair of CIOGC, to give his closing remarks. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Greetings. I really want to thank the candidates coming out this afternoon to be with us. We want to engage with you, and we want you to hear from us on the specific matters, especially involving our Muslim community and the Illinoisans. So the council is the largest Muslim organization, represented over 70 mosques. We represent 500,000 of Muslims of Chicagoland area, and we are so proud of the work that council is doing, especially in the civic space. We give an opportunity to our candidates to come and speak to our community. We also give an opportunity for our community to be engaged with those candidates and hear from issues and concerns that we all are near and dear to all of us. Council actually has become a go-to stop for all the government officials, and we are on their pulse. If anything happens in the government and they want to hear a comment, and they will reach out to the council for the comments. Just an example and point in case, I was offered to come in the House by the Speaker of the House on giving a Muslim perspective on the hate crimes in the state of Illinois. And I was humbly honored to be part of that and giving a perspective of how these hate crimes, especially in the state of Illinois, has transpiring, as we all heard today. And this is what council does. This is our representation. This is who we are as a 30-year-old organization representing our community in this forum, to be engaged, to be informed, and make sure our community is making an informed decision on who those candidates are and then who they need to elect and select. And our role is to bring those candidates to these forums to make sure that we have heard them and make sure that community is all informed, and so they can make an informed decision based on that. Our role doesn't stop only by having these candidate forums once in a while or during the year of election, but we do year-round civic engagement process that we do, a congressional town hall series that Dr. Sabah Khan talked about. We do educational awareness programs. We do voter registration. We were heavily involved in the census. And one of the major signature programs that we do as a council that we have been doing for past 12 and 13 years is Illinois Muslim Action Day. On that day, we go to Springfield and we take our community's advocacy role and present at the state level and make sure those policies are driving to help our community forward. So in today's Congressional Forum, I really want to thank all of you for joining today. And Council is happy to host this. And I also want to thank Brother Osama Jamal, who's standing way in the back and said his opening remark. Thank you for allowing us to host this program here. I want to thank my board, Dr. Sabah Khan, Vice Chair, Dr. Hamade, board member, Dr. Shoaib Khadri. Sister Shireen was just here. She must be just stepped out. But everyone who are here and the board, the staff, I really want to thank all of you for your help and support in engaging this educational forum, which I think is going to go a long ways. So thank you again for coming out, and thank you for being part of this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Irshad. And to our audience, we know some of you have traveled a long ways to join us in the Mosque Foundation for this forum. So a final thank you to all of you as well. And we look forward to seeing you at future events just like these. We hope you all get home safe. And thank you all for coming.